Thank you, Jay. All right. Yeah, I had this. Okay, let's see. We had five youth in our house last night. The nursery worker, ministry assistant, and not a one of them thought it would be a good idea to wake the pastor up before they walked out of the house. Just let me be. Yeah. Amanda calls me. It's like, hey, it's after 9. Are you still coming? I'm like, I think I better go. So, all right. So, guys, starting next week, we're going to be doing this new series called Deep Clean, and it's like this spring cleaning for your heart, for your mind, for your soul. Okay, and I think it's going to be really, cool. Not only that, we're going to have a literal spring cleaning soon here at the church. Probably sometime later this month, maybe first of next. After we get all the, we'll let you know, when. But do you sense a theme there, right? Like this sort of seems to be a theme this month of cleaning and getting things cleaned up. And I thought, before we start our series next week, what if we have a little trailer to it, a pre view of it? And I thought maybe instead of maybe we do like a church-wide thing, because as in our series, it's going to be very personal, right? It's going to be something that you do, right? And I thought maybe we could have something that applies to the whole church and have this spiritual spring clean. And what is something that really can apply to an entire, church? Something that we could put out there and everybody could be a part of, kind of cleaning it up in a spiritual way. And to be honest, there was only one sin I could really think of that I've seen in every single church I've ever been in, whether I was there and I served or whether I visited once. I saw it. All right? It's like it's everywhere. It's a sin that many times people just shrug off and they say it's not that big of a deal, although it does a great deal of damage. And this is the sin of gossip. The sin of gossip. Man, I'm going to tell you, it seems like any problem you ever have in a church, okay, no matter if somebody's up, set or it doesn't matter. Gossips always seem to be present in that problem. Whether there's times the whole problem is gossip, but there's times even when it's not, there's always this little layer of gossip that kind of happens. And, talking about spring cleaning and kind of cleaning up, kind of sticking with that, theme, and I'm going to kind of do that as we go through our series, but I would say gossip is like an infestation of pests, okay? Now, before we go further, if you're sitting there, you're like, oh my gosh, I'm the church gossip. I know I am. I'm not calling you a pest, okay? I'm not. The sin is the pest, okay? And if you've ever had, an infestation of maybe ants or termites or mice or, something, there's a few things that really you can relate to that really relate to gossip. One, it's annoying, right? It's annoying. I know a year or so ago, I opened up a cabinet, and we had a bunch of ants in one of the kitchen Not a huge thing, but man, was it annoying. I threw everything out because I don't know what these ants have touched. It causes damage, right? It causes damage. You get mice or rats or termites or something. They cause damage. They cause actual damage to your house. It can be scary. I know Amanda, I don't think we've ever had an infestation at all of spiders, but every once in a while we'll have a spider in the house. Now, I always like having at least one spider in the house because they kill other insects, but Amanda doesn't. But Amanda will come and say, oh my gosh, honey, you got to come in this room. There's a spider. You got to kill it. And I don't know why I ask this every time. It's just instinct, I guess. I'm going in, I'm looking for it, and I'm like, how big is it? Y'all ever ask that? How big is it? And I find it, and it's about the size of a dime. But Amanda was like, honey, I don't know, it was about this big. But fear makes things look a little bit bigger. Just like gossip, when you're dealing with an infestation, if you don't deal with it, it just gets worse. It just gets worse. You know, if you have termites out on your wood deck, you don't say, they'll get full and move on. That doesn't happen. They call all their buddies over to feast on your deck. It just gets worse. So like gossip, we have to address it or it becomes an infestation. Now look, I want to be very clear and very honest here. I don't think we have an infestation of gossip at this church. I don't, okay? Trust me, I've been in, churches where they were infested. It was rampant. It was every day you walked in the church, there was gossip. We don't have, that. But we have signs. We have little signs. If I was, like I said, comparing it to like actual pests, we got signs of a mouse here and there. We got a few ants in the cupboard. People have seen a spider or two. It's like that, right? Like there's a few signs, and we just address it before it becomes an issue. I'll tell you a kind of funny story. It's kind of an embarrassing story. I'm only going to tell you half because I'll tell you the other half at the end. Me and Amanda were young. Ashlyn was just a baby. And me and Amanda were sitting in our apartment. We're watching TV. And I felt like out of the corner of my eye, I had saw something. You ever have that? And finally, at one point, I kind of got a glimpse, and I looked. And I jumped up on the couch. And Amanda said, what? And I said, I just saw a wolf rat running around right over there. And Amanda's like, what's that mean? What's a wolf rat? I said, I don't know, but I heard my mom discuss it. It's a big rat. It'll eat the baby. I was dead serious. I was not joking. I was serious. This is how serious I was. Amanda said, what do we do? It's about 1 o'clock in the morning. I said, get your stuff. We're leaving. We left, went to my sister's, okay? We spent the night, there. That night turned into a couple of weeks. And by the end of those couple of weeks, we had moved out of our apartment and moved to another place, right? Now, I'll tell you the rest of the story because it gets way more embarrassing in the end. But that was the beginning. So the first thing we have to do with like gossip is dispel this idea that it's not a big deal, right? As I mentioned, almost every problem in a church has an element of gossip to it. Sometimes gossip is what causes a problem. There's times gossip is what fuels it. There's times gossip is what keeps it alive. It's like this problem's pretty much solved and it's dying and it's over. And gossip fuels it and keeps it going. But almost always, gossip adds to the hurt feelings of people in a problem. And I tell you, I always have a hard time hearing it's not a big deal. Because people will say that about a lot of different sins. It's not a big thing. I'm going to tell you something. It is. It's a huge deal. I probably said this in the past, and I'll probably say it 100 other times. If the only sin ever committed in the history of man or in the future was one word of gossip, if that was all that ever happened, we all were perfect other than that, the gospel would not change. Jesus would still have to come to earth. He would still have to live a perfect life, and he would have to die on the cross for that sin. So when somebody says that's not a big deal, we can go back to, I think it was our Easter message, and we were looking at Jesus on the cross. We were picturing that. Tell him it's not a big deal. It's a huge deal. I think a lot of times the reason we think gossip is no big deal is because when we gossip, we usually don't end up seeing the damage it caused, right? We don't see that person that we talked about, they're going to be strong in front of us. We don't see them crying in the car on the way home, right? You don't have that conversation with them in my, office where they feel like, why am I betrayed by the people who are supposed to care about me most? It is a big deal. So many folks get hurt by, the sin of gossip that they leave the church. They turn on the church. Gossip is really a painful thing, and I think most of us have probably experienced that, haven't you? Haven't you been gossiped about, whether it's at church or at work or in your family or somewhere? And I'd say that we're probably all guilty of this at some point. I'll give you an example. Last church I served at, infestation of gossip. It was rampant, and had a lot of problems. And I was at the point that I was going to leave. And I thought, okay, I didn't trust any of the elders. What many people I trusted. Didn't trust the associate pastor. And I'm talking about trust as far as just keeping things confidential and to themselves and not gossip, right? But I had 3 people in the room that I trusted. Our leader of children, our senior pastor, and the secretary of the church. I'm going to tell you exactly what happened in real time. Our meeting was kind of winding down, and I said, I got to tell y'all something. I'm going to be leaving the church. I said, however, I would like to help you all out. I will stay here for another 6 months. Okay? Everybody's like, shoo, good. Okay, we got time. I was like, yes, everybody's got time. On one condition, that this stays between us. If this gets out, I leave that day. Okay? It's got to stay between us. I'm not going to be staying here and trying to answer questions and deal with all of that. I said, are we in agreement? Everybody said yes. I said, sorry, I just don't have that kind of trust. So I went to each one. I said, are you good? Yes, I'll keep it here. Pastor, you. Secretary, you. Yes. Great. This is all that happened. We said a prayer. We said amen. And I walked out of that office, out of that room, about 30 feet down to my office. And I remember I went behind my desk, and I laid my phone down, and I stretched. I don't know why I remember that, but I stretched. I was like, oh, gosh. My phone buzzed. I thought, oh, gosh, who's this? This was the message. It was from a parent of somebody in our youth. Just heard, sorry you're leaving us. I thought, it took like 45 seconds for me what? I walked out in the hallway and I said, I guess I'm leaving today. And that was it. I was like, what happened? All 3 said, I didn't do it. It's like, you're the only one I told. I even told my wife. I didn't even tell my kids. You're the only people that know. And because one person decided they just couldn't hold that juicy gossip in, that was 3 people I thought I would have a relationship with beyond church, but now I don't trust any of them. I don't know who's doing it. I would say all of you have stories similar to, that. And if you think it's not a big deal, let's look at where God kind of puts it. In Romans chapter 1, we're going to look at a passage here. It says, they were filled with all manner of unrighteousness, evil, of covetousness, malice. They are full of envy, murder, strife, deceit, maliciousness. They are gossips, slanderers, haters of God, insolent, haughty, boastful, inventors of evil, disobedient to parents, foolish, faithless, heartless, and ruthless. Look at the company God puts gossip in. Gossipers are in this company. God puts them right in there in the same verses with murderers, inventors of evil, people that are heartless. I mean, look at the list. We can't. We can say it's no big deal, but God certainly doesn't see it that way. Here's the other thing. I learned this working with the school, like whether as a coach or a teacher. They would always tell me a little trick you can use when you're dealing with a parent, and you have to tell them something not so good about their kid, right? Your kid is making bad grades, or your kid isn't doing this. Here's the trick. Just say they aren't the only one dealing with it. For some reason, and it worked. They were right. It works. Parents are like, okay, so my kid's not the only one acting up. My kid's not the only one that isn't. And it made them feel better. To be honest, I think it made me feel better. I feel like I've had that line, told on, me. Something about it, we feel better about being in the crowd, right? About being in the majority. Well, let's not forget, just a few weeks ago, we talked about those two roads, the one that's broad that has the crowd on it. Everybody's on it, and the narrow country road, if you remember, that very few are on. Just because everybody's doing it doesn't mean that makes it okay, and it doesn't make it any less hurtful to God or the people that it's happening to. So, let's kind of move on to this. What is gossip? How do we define it? Right? Because I'm going to tell you, I think it can be hard. I think a lot of the time, we don't even realize we're doing it at times. As a matter of fact, this week at our staff meeting, I was telling Joyce and Ashlyn about me and Jay going golfing this week. And then I said, oh, by the way, let me tell you who I saw. Nothing wrong with that. But then as I talked, I got about 3 sentences in, and I stopped and I said, guys, have I just moved into gossip now? And Joyce and Ashlyn kind of smiled and went, I think so. And I was like, okay, story over. Let's just move on, right? I didn't intend to, but that kind of happens, right? So let's look at a verse here that might help us. It's in Ephesians chapter 4. It says, let no corrupting talk come out of your mouth. Corrupting talk. Gossip does corrupt. It corrupts the gossiper. It corrupts the listener. And it corrupts the person that we're discussing. Our talk should not be harmful. It should not be spoken in a destructive way, right? And then God shows us here, he kind of gives us the comparison and the contrast. Okay? Because the next line says, but only such as is good for building up. So don't let corrupting talk come out. Let talk that's good for building up. That needs to be what is, coming out. And I love the way that it starts at the first two words, but only. Only that. Okay. It doesn't mean mostly that. Let most of your talk be good. No. It doesn't say that. Only. We can't say, well, I did gossip, but most of the story was good. No. It's not the way that it works. Our talk that comes out should be wholesome. It's constructive. It doesn't do harm. Now, one little caveat. Does that mean that all of our speech has to come out rainbows and unicorns? No, there's times we have to have difficult conversations, right? But there's a difference. Let me give you this. If Amanda and I are discussing, let's say Kingston, I like to pick on him a lot. If we're discussing if Kingston got into some trouble at school and we're discussing that, we can sit there and discuss the bad that he's done. This is what that we need to correct and fix. It's not a pleasant talk. It's not all praises. It's not all that, but it is constructive. We are trying to figure out how to help him. So I hope you can kind of see the difference there. The next part of the verse says, as fits the occasion. Guys, there's a time and a place for everything. There's times that what we're saying may not be gossip if it's done in the right setting. I'll give you an example here, because a lot of times the way we kind of work around gossip is we change the word. We say, I'm not gossiping, I'm venting. I'm just venting. So I believe in venting. I believe venting is really good, but the setting has to be right. So let's just use this as an example. I am upset at Amanda. Believe it or not, that does happen. So me and Amanda are upset. We've had a fight, and I'm mad, and I just need to vent some stuff out before I ultimately go and do whatever a man's going to do. We're going to go and we're going to apologize. But before I do that, I got to vent some stuff out, right? So what I vent isn't going to change here in my example. So what if I grab Kingston? Kingston, come over here. I got to vent. Well, that's not right. That's his mom. You know, we all live in the same house. That's not good, right? So what about this, okay? Not Kingston, because I'm just going to limit it to the people in this room. Let's say I go to Jay. Maybe a little bit better. There's an adult. He doesn't live, but don't Jay and Amanda kind of have a relationship up here on this stage, right? They're probably friends to a degree. Maybe the best option, what if I ask Carrie, right? Him and Amanda don't have a relationship of any kind. They see each other at church, but Carrie's older. I mean that in a good way. He is mature. He's married. By all accounts, it seems like he's got it figured out. So he would be a good guy for me to go to. Do you see what the difference in my venting? It has nothing to do with what I'm saying. It's who I'm saying it to. Right? It's who I'm saying it to. The last thing it says here is that it may give grace to those who hear. Give grace to those who what? Hear. The listener of the gossip, right? The listener of the conversation. Is the person hearing it, are they feeling positive about the talk? Guys, if you gossip, you have got to consider the person you're gossiping to. Care enough about them not to make them an accomplice in your sin. Don't put them in a position that they are now involved in, this, and they have to answer questions. Especially if you're talking about someone that they care about. I'm going to tell you, I may have said this in the past, but if somebody comes to me, and this has happened, I'll have somebody come to me and say, hey, I got to tell you, I was in the sanctuary. Guess what Jay was in there saying about you? Was it something bad? Oh, yeah. Yeah. I don't care what Jay said. What'd you say? You was listening? What'd you say? Because now I'm about to find out, how good of a friend are you to me? Right? How good of a friend are, you? Did you take up for me? Did you correct anything that was, wrong? Or did you say, hey, I hear you're about to talk about my good buddy. I think I'll back out of this. I'm not going to be a part of that. I always, anytime I hear about gossip, I want to know what the listener did. Because if the listener said, well, I just nodded, I said, okay, I don't know. You might as well have said it to me as far as I'm concerned. Right? Gossip is this communication that has no real purpose other than to spread rumors. Maybe some of it's true. It may not. The gossiper doesn't really care. And like I said, I think even though it can come about in an unintentional way, that doesn't excuse us from being immune to the consequences. So I want to give you a little bit of help, here. If it's unintentional, here are some things that you can do. Here's some questions you can ask and determine if what you're saying is gossip. One, does what's being said have a positive or constructive purpose to it? Are we truly trying to help each other or someone? Is this really positive? Is this constructive? In other words, is this corrupting talk or not? Question 2 would be, would this be said, everything that's being said, not just part of it, all of it, would what's being said and in the tone it's being said and everything, would it be said if the person was actually present? Okay? And I'm going to tell you, this is how I handle it. Now, in the church, I haven't had to do this here yet. I hope I don't. But I've had to do it just about any church I've been. I've done it once, and then I never have to do it again. Now, I'll tell you how I handle it. I will take gossip and make it not gossip, right? So if I'm in my office and I overhear, Cassie talking about, oh my gosh, did you hear what that Amanda, did you see her today? Oh my gosh, she looks, like she ought to be out on the corner, I say, Cassie, now you're not gossiping, right? Surely not. Well, Amanda's almost here. When she gets here, I'll grab her and I'll grab you and you can tell her what that you said. We'll change the way she's dressing or something, right? Whatever it is. But we'll get everybody in the room and we'll just discuss it. That way it's not gossip. But would this be said if the person was present? Is this edifying the people that are hearing it? A huge red flag. If you want to know if you're about to hear gossip, here's a red flag. It's when somebody says, now don't tell anybody I said this. A lot of times it's not don't repeat it. They want you to go repeat it. Listen to it again. Don't tell anybody I said this. I don't want to be involved. Because I know this ain't real. I know there's some exaggeration here. I know this is going to hurt someone else. I want to have my hands clean. It was funny to me. I was telling you about my story about being in church and people gossip before I got to my office. I asked the lady who had texted me, "Who told you this?" And she said, "They asked me not to say, so I'm gonna honor that." I said, "Wow, you're a better person than them, because they couldn't honor it when I asked." And that was a perfect example of, now, don't tell anybody I said it. Can the conversation be freely shared without harming someone's their reputation? Those are a few little things. Now, if you are a gossiper, if this is a sin that you struggle with, and I'm not talking about from time to time you say something you shouldn't, even though that's wrong and that's bad, but I'm not talking about the unintentional stuff. You're kind of like, no, I'm the one. I'm all over the place. I'm telling everybody every thing. I'm like the little boy on the corner with the paper. Come and read all about. I'm that person. What do they call that? The town crier, right? I really hope that this helps. I hope that you see that it's not innocent. Damage is being caused that you probably don't even know. It's kind of like, again, it's like those termites. You don't really see the damage that they're doing until it's too late, right? Now, we've talked about what gossip is. We've talked about how we can recognize it, but how do we stop it? We're talking about this as an extermination. It's like, Preston, when do we pull out all the pesticide and start spraying, right? You might have thought it was going to happen just then, like, hey, I'm talking to the gossipers. In my experience, that doesn't do any good. Most church gossipers don't even know that they're the church gossip. They have no idea. They are clueless. I'll preach this and they'll be out in the parking lot, saying, now you know who he was talking about, right? You know who he was talking about. Everybody else knows who you are. Everybody's like, yeah, he's talking about you. Or, I can honestly say I don't really have anybody in mind. But most of the time, people, they don't know who that they are. Gossiping has become such a part of what they do, they don't even realize that they're doing it. And hopefully today that, changes. But that's not what we're going to do. We are not just going to hope that people who struggle with this sin figure it out and they change. It's kind of like hoping that the mouse in your house realizes that they aren't welcome and that they'll move on. It's not going to happen, right? We don't exterminate gossip by hoping the gossipers stop gossiping it. And we don't want to run them off. That's not the point, either. It's not the gossiper we have an issue with. It's the gossip. It's the sin. So how do we exterminate gossip in the church or in the work, place or anywhere else? The power to eradicate all gossip does not rest within the gossiper. It rests in the listener. I prayed and asked God to give me a better example. And it wasn't until just the other day He explained why this was perfect. But the analogy I'm going to give you here is pornography. And I thought, God, don't make me talk about porn in front of the church. But He said, no, that's how gossip is. It's that dirty and that nasty of a sin. I saw this stat, and I thought it was embarrassing. But this was long back in the day. I think it was like in the early 90s or something. That, you remember in hotels, you had to buy movies or pornography or whatever. You had to buy that, and the front desk took care of it somehow. The front desk, or hotels, there was a hotel chain, I think it was Holiday Inn, it was like a big chain, said that the pornography sales spiked when there was a Christian event in the hotel. And we think, oh my gosh, why do we gossip? And if there was one thing, I'm sure there's other things, but if like there was one sin, I think if I could just snap my fingers and it would go away, it would be pornography. Because I see how it affects so many people and the studies that are coming out, how it affects people's minds. And people think, get rid of these people that make these movies and all that. No, quit watching it and they'll quit making it. Get rid of the audience. If they're not making money, if it wasn't a, $100 billion industry, they'd make something else. And we look at that, and I think that's where it relates to like gossip too, because a lot of people would say, who am I hurting? I ain't hurting anybody. You know how many people I've had to sit down and like counsel with, how many women I've sat down, with that are destroyed because their husband is doing, that? It makes them feel not good enough or not adequate. Like I said, it has psychological effects. Why do you think trafficking has boomed? Because they're running out of actresses. So they're going and they're kidnapping them and they're making them do do it. We can't say it's harmless, and it's the same thing with like gossip. There would be no gossip if they didn't have an audience. Stop listening. Stop participating. And how do you do it? You think, Preston, what do I do? Somebody's standing there, they're talking to me. One thing you can do is just like I said I did this week. I caught myself and just stopped. Is this gossip? I just called it out. And then we just moved on. There's times, though, but in that case, I was the gossiper, the listener. I would encourage you to say, hey, I'm sorry to interrupt, but have we moved, and say we. That sounds better. It's easier to take. Have we moved into gossip here? Now, somebody who it's unintentional and they don't mean, to, they're probably going to be like, I think we have. Let's just stop. Let's just move on. Now, a habitual gossiper, I'm not going to lie, they may get offended. But it's better to offend them than it is to offend God. It's better to offend them than to do damage to the innocent folks in the church. Another thing you can do is just refuse to listen. You know, if somebody's talking to me and I'm like, I don't know what else to do. You know what? I'm sorry. I think you're gossiping. I'm not listening to it. You know, you're bringing up Jerry. I think the world of like Jerry. I'm not listening. That's my friend. That's my guy. No. So let me finish my wolf rat story. We got everything moved out, and Amanda went back to do a once over. She said, Preston, come here. She said, the wolf rat's in the kitchen. I said, oh no. At least the baby's not here, you know. And I go in there. Sure enough, there was the wolf rat. Maybe this big. And almost half dead. Wasn't even, I mean, too far gone to even run from us. He kind of hopped, just in one spot. But here's the thing. Now I was so embarrassed. My family will never let that die. But here's the thing. This is why I think it's happening. I think God's given it a purpose. We can all look at gossip that way. I don't care how little it actually is. We should see it as a wolf rat. It's big, it's dangerous, and we should get as far away from it as possible. Right? That's how we should be treating it. No matter how small, no matter how innocent that is, looks, in our eyes, it's giant, it's dangerous. We run. We get away. Now again, I don't think we have an infestation issue of gossip here at our, church. I don't think we need to call Terminex or anybody to come get it all out. No. It's at the stage where it's like we run to Lowe's and we buy a little bottle of that stuff and we spray a few corners, right? And we do that by we just start saying from this point on, I'm not listening to any gossip. I'm not. My hope is that you feel better prepared to kind of handle that in church, at work, at school, at home, or wherever it, is happening. And I really hope you'll make a commitment to making our church maybe the only gossip-free church, but that's our commitment. We want to make this a gossip-free place. If you would, please, let's stand. Father, we just thank you for the time that we've had, here. Lord, I pray that if there's hearts that need to be convicted, that you convict them. If there's things that people need to change in their life, that you change them. God, I ask that you help us all with this. You help us see it for what that it is. It's not an innocent thing that just everybody does. It's a sin. It's a sin that we willfully do. Lord, I ask that if anybody struggles with it, that you help them. And you give us all the courage and the strength to make a commitment that we're going to eradicate our church of this sin. And it's in Jesus' name I pray. Amen.